New video. Let's get it. We got some face cam today. In this one, we're going to be talking about how to find bossing parties. I'm going to have a little guide in the description that'll go over it's a very quick guide, but it's going to go over exactly the ways that you can find bossing parties, the three main different ways, and then the best way to use each one will be bolded, which we're going to go over all that, so you don't got to worry. But if you ever want to refer back to the guide, link will be in the description. The first thing I want to say is this, I'm specifically talking from Chronos. This might apply differently depending on the population of your server. So something like the recruit tab, where the population in a server that like the population is not that high, it might not be that great to use. Real quick, I want to go over some basic vocabulary just in case there's newer people watching this so you understand. Lucid and Will is referred to as Lu Will. Lomian is Lotus and Damien. C10 is the Tenebrous bosses, which is Vihila, Darknell, and Gloom. So if you ever hear any of those, that's what that means. I also have a guide on my channel. Basically goes over all of the beginner vocabulary and acronyms and everything in Maplestory. There's a ton of them. It just goes over a bunch. So if you're newer and you hear a lot of stuff in videos that you don't understand. Boss difficulties. So basically you put the boss difficulty right in front of the actual boss, right? So if you're doing, let's say, hard Lotus, you would do H Lotus. If you're doing hard Lotus and Damien, you do H Lomian. If it was easy, you'd put an E in front of it. If it's normal, you put an N. If it's extreme, I think you put an X. But yeah, that's basically all it is. So like hard Lotus and Damien is just H Lomian. Whenever you see something like that or somebody say it, that's what it means. There's three different ways that we're going to go over to find parties, and each one has its own very like good uses, which we'll go over as well. So the first one is the recruit tab in game. The primary use for it that I would say is doing your weekly bosses, just getting them done every week. So bosses like H Lomian, H Luwil, C10, Saren, Guardian Angel Slime, basically just getting those done every week until you're able to solo the boss, I think is the best way that you can use the recruit tab. It's pretty easy to find parties for any of that stuff. You can get most of the bosses done up to E Kalos, H Saren, and Black Mage, which I'll show in a second. It's also good for finding struggle parties to do CRA and Lomian on your boss mules, and you could use them for a trade. It's just not ideal. So, for example, if you're, let's say you're at a point where you can do up to C10, which hard Vihila is the most you can do. You can find parties for that pretty easily in the recruit tab. Doing your weekly bosses up to probably Vihila are pretty easy to find in the recruit tab. You can also find hard Saren pretty easily and normal Saren. And then E Kalos is pretty easy to find in the recruit tab also. The one caveat I would say for the recruit tab is if you're barely able to do a boss, like you're barely strong enough, getting accepted in the recruit tab is going to be very hard to do. Like people will not want somebody that is barely able to do a boss. So that's when it's a little bit more difficult. For the most part, I would say 100% up to H Vihila, and H Saren and E Kalos is like the max. With any of this, if you're very low, like barely able to do a boss, it's going to be a lot harder to use the recruit tab, and we'll go over a way to specifically do that if you're barely able to do a boss. That's mainly for the recruit tab. Also the struggle parties, right? So if you're on a boss mule, or if you're newer to a boss, struggle parties, like you can see here, this person put struggle. So everybody's going to be probably like barely able to do the boss, which is fine. You can find struggle parties very easily. Anything on your boss meal. So like if you need to do normal Lucid and Will, or if you need to do normal Lotus and Damien, if you need to do Gallic, to do CRA, it's going to be very easy to find in the recruit tab for your boss meals. Guild Discords is next. You can do your weekly bossing through your guild Discord. I wouldn't really recommend it because it's just easier to use the recruit tab and find it. It's just a lot faster. They can be good for finding permanent parties to boss with, right? So let's say you're in a guild Discord, but most of them will have like a bossing party. It's like party forming here, and then this other one has a bossing area. But you could find people to do bosses with. You end up like vibing pretty good with the people that you're in a guild with. You talk to them a lot. You talk to them in voice chat. You'll probably end up doing bosses with them, and you will boss with them permanently. The main two ways I think in terms of bossing guilds are really helpful is when you're newer to a boss. Let's say it's your first time, you don't know how to do Lucid and Will. Having your guild teach you it will be very useful because they're a lot more understanding and patient than somebody who's like randomly in the recruit tab. Most of the time they want people experienced. So for like brand new runs or like learning a boss, guilds very useful. Also getting carries and speeding up your progression, guilds are extremely useful. The best time I would say for guilds in terms of carries are this area right here. So like the hard Lotus and Damien to hard Vihila is extremely useful for getting carries. So if you're able to do these bosses right here, let's say like normal Darknell, normal Gloom, normal Lucid, normal Will, normal Lotus, normal Damien, getting carries to be able to do the hard versions is extremely useful, especially for Lucid Will, Damien and Lotus because you can get boxes from them. So like if you don't have Absolab gear and you're doing normal Lotus and Damien, you could get a carry for hard if you're able to do 5%, and you could get the box drop for the Absolab gear, and then you don't have to do all the like the weekly quest. The weekly quest you wouldn't have to do, and you just have a chance of getting the Absolab armor box, and it can speed up your progression a lot. Same thing with Arcanes. So if you're able to do normal Lucid and Will, and you can 5% hard Lucid and Will, it's a lot better to get the carry for the 5% hard Lucid and Will because you have a chance of getting Arcane drops. A lot of times too, they might not need a Twilight mark, so you can get the Twilight mark early. So it's really useful if you can get hard carries because you can get the Absolab or the Arcane box. If you get Arcane boxes and you get your Arcanes way earlier, it's going to be super helpful for your progression because these take a long time to get. And same thing with any of these bosses up to here. So like this area right here, like the best place to get carries because you can get Arcane boxes through all these. It is basically your next set of gears. So like Daybreak Pendant is your next set of gear. Arcanes are your next set. Estella earrings is the next set. You get that from here. Slime ring is next set. So it's all really helpful. Twilight mark is your next accessory. Anything in this area is extremely helpful. And if you can get carries for any of this through your guild, it'll help you out a lot. As you can, like, this is a perfect example. You can see on my thing, I've never even completed normal Lotus and normal Lucid because I got carries for them right away. So like hard Lotus and hard Lucid, I've only done the hard versions because I've gotten carries every single time. So I've never, on my main, I've never even done normal Lucid, normal Lotus. Getting carries extremely useful. It speeds up your progression like crazy. So I'd highly recommend. And that's, I would say, guild discords, learning bosses, and getting carries are your main two things that are going to be really useful for using your guild in terms of bossing. The third and final one is Reboot Central. So same thing. You can use all three of these options to do anything, but they have like best uses, right? Most efficient uses. You can use it to do your weekly bossing, but the recruit tab is just going to be better. It's going to be faster. It's going to be more efficient. It's also, Reboot is very good for trading bosses. So like if we go into the Reboot Central Discord and I go to like anything, let's say I go to Lomian. Real quick too, the way it works is you pick the bosses that you want to be in the channel for. It tells you the icon and you just click the icon and then you'll have access to the channel. Let's say Lomian. Let's say I want to trade Lomian. Let's scroll up a little bit. Trade Lomian. Let's keep scrolling up. Trade. There's all these trades, right? Let's go Slime. Same thing. Trade. Trade. Same thing. Let's see Tenny. Duo. Trade. It's like it's pretty easy to find trades in Reboot Central. I would say it's probably the easiest way. You could also, again, you could use your guild Discord. You could use the recruit tab as well. Creating parties when you're low CP and won't get accepted into the recruit tab. This is the best use I've gotten out of Reboot Central, 100%. So I'll give an example of this. Let's say this person right here is recruiting for, like, this is a perfect example. This person is recruiting for Black Mage, right? And Black Mage is something you can find in the recruit tab, but the lower CP you are for anything, the harder it's going to be to find a party that will accept you. So let's say, for example, I did my first Black Mage run at 42 mil CP. I tried to recruit for it and I tried to join. I would not get accepted. People that would join my Black Mage runs when I would recruit for it in here were all around 40 to 60 mil CP, which theoretically we can do the boss. But the issue is that people cannot survive long enough to be able to do the boss because it, like, if everybody's like average 50 mil CP, it's probably like a 25-30 minute run. People usually can survive like 8 to 15 minutes max at that CP. So the issue there is people can't survive long enough and I can't get accepted into higher level parties. So like this person is doing practice and they still want 90 mil CP minimum. I've seen like 70, I've seen 60, I've seen 80. But the issue is when you're lower CP for a boss, when you're like barely able to do the boss, it's harder to find in the recruit tab. And that's where Reboot Central comes in handy. The first run I did, I tried using the recruit tab. I was 42 mil CP. It wasn't working. So I used Reboot Central. And I didn't try to join a party. I wouldn't recommend trying to join because you're going to have the same issue as the recruit tab where people just won't accept you because you're too low CP. What I did was I started recruiting for a Black Mage run. The run I did, the first one, I had like a 200 mil plus. I had like a couple 150-ish. I had like a high level bishop and we did it in like 8 minutes. But I would have never been able to get that run, or it would have been really unlikely for me to get that run if I was using the recruit tab. So that's why the Reboot Central is extremely useful, or that's one of the reasons. If you're really weak, barely able to do a boss, you can find a run in the recruit tab by recruiting for it. And I would also recommend, if you're recruiting or joining just in general in the Reboot Central, don't just post your message and then do nothing after that. I would always, if you're trying to join, look at the people recruiting and DM them. And if you're recruiting, look at the people trying to join a party and DM them as well. But it's super useful if you're really weak and you need to find a party for a boss. I would recruit for the party. I would not try to join one, and just put the party together yourself. I think it's kind of like if a 200 mil CP person's trying to find a black mage run, it's going to be very easy for them to do it. If you're a 40 mil CP person, it's going to be very hard. So what do? You recruit for it instead of trying to join one. But that's the best use and the biggest tip I can give you if you're low CP for any boss. Use the Reboot Central Discord. The other way you can use it, which is also really useful, is just bossing parties in general for the higher tier bosses and permanent parties. So I would say probably at this point right here, Black Mage and up is when Reboot Central is very useful. So like if you need to find a permanent party for like E-Kalos, if you need to find a permanent party for H-Saren, you can find these pretty easily in the recruit tab. Same issue though, if you're low CP, it might be better to use Reboot Central. E-Calling and up is really when the Reboot Central will come in handy for finding like permanent parties. Black Mage as well. I like to get you could find it in the recruit tab for sure. I like to get my runs done first day, and I like to have it prepped beforehand. Just like I did today is the first day of the month. I've already done my Black Mage run. I did it at reset. So I used Reboot Central. I put a party together. I honestly always just put parties together because it takes more work, but like you kind of get to curate it how you want the party to be. So I put the party together and I did it first day at reset. I would say anything Black Mage and up, Reboot Central is extremely useful. If you're lower than Black Mage, it's really useful for training anything lower than Black Mage. That's literally about it. I'll just gonna recap it real quick. So recruit tab is very useful for doing your weekly bossing up to H-Saren and E-Kalos, but I would say really up to C10E for sure. H-Saren and E-Kalos as long as you're strong enough for people to accept you. Same thing with Black Mage. You can find it, but as long as if you're strong enough for people to accept you. Guild Discord, very useful if you are new to a boss, you need to learn the boss. If you're brand new to, let's say, Will, and you need to learn Will, your guild's going to be very useful. Also, getting carries is going to be very useful for your progression. Guild Discord is going to be the best place to get carries by far. Reboot Central is extremely useful if you're barely able to do a boss and you can't get a party in the recruit tab because you won't get accepted. Just make the party yourself and recruit people. Also, just finding parties for the higher levels of bosses. I consider higher levels of bosses Black Mage and up. So like from this hard Black Mage area and up, that's also like higher tier bossing. Some people might say it's higher than that. They might be like here, and I say hard Black Mage and up. This is when I think Reboot Central is very useful and the most useful time for it. Just finding trades in general, Reboot Central's gonna be your best bet. Have any other super good tips for finding bossing parties? Feel free to leave in the comments below. Found it useful, like, sub, help you get to 1K. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching.